My father remarried 11 months after my mother's funeral. That was the moment I understood that grief looks different for everyone, and that some people don't grieve at all. I was 17 when my mother, Carol, passed away from ovarian cancer. She fought for 2 years, and I spent those 2 years learning how to cook her favorite soup, how to drive her to appointments, how to sit beside a hospital bed and pretend everything was going to be fine. I became an adult at 15 the moment she was diagnosed, and I became truly alone at 17 the moment she was gone. My father, Daniel, was a good man in the way that some good men are decent at work, friendly to neighbors, completely lost when it came to managing his own emotions. He needed someone to organize his life. My mother had done that. After she was gone, I watched him wander through the house for about 8 months before he found Margaret. Margaret worked at the front desk of his dental office. She was 12 years younger than him, organized, efficient, and she had a way of speaking to my father like he was a child who needed guidance. He found that comforting. I found it unsettling, but I was 17 and living in his house, so I kept my mouth shut, watched carefully, and started counting the days until I could build a life of my own. I want to be clear about something before I go further, because I've told pieces of this story to friends over the years, and the first question is always the same. Did you try to give her a chance? Yes, I did. I tried genuinely. I wasn't one of those kids who decided to hate the step-parent before they even walked through the door. I introduced myself politely. I ate dinners at the same table. I answered her questions about school. I gave her almost a full year of real effort. But Margaret wasn't interested in building a relationship with me. What she was interested in, I would only fully understand later, was positioning herself inside my father's finances, and eventually, mine. I graduated high school, got accepted into a nursing program 2 states away, and moved into a small apartment near the campus with a roommate named Priya, who became one of my closest friends. Being away from that house felt like being released from something I hadn't fully realized was holding me. I studied hard. I worked weekends at a hospital cafe to cover what my scholarship didn't. I was careful with money because I had to be my father helped with tuition, and that was it. And I was grateful for that much. My mother had left me something. Not a lot, but something. She had a small life insurance policy, about $42,000, that went into a savings account in my name when I turned 18. She had told me about it the year before she died, sitting in the hospital bed with an IV in her arm, holding my hand. She said it wasn't meant to be spent on anything ordinary. It was for a house someday, or for an emergency that really mattered, or for a dream that needed a foundation. She said she wanted to know that no matter what happened, I would have a floor underneath me. I kept that money untouched. I didn't touch it for a single expense during nursing school. It sat in a savings account, and I checked it the way you check on something precious, not because you need it yet, but because knowing it's there makes you braver. Margaret found out about it during my 2nd year of nursing school. I don't know exactly how it came up. My father mentioned later that it was a conversation about estate planning. Margaret had suggested they sit down and review all the family's assets together. He said he mentioned my mother's insurance policy almost casually, the way you mention something you assume everyone already knows. Margaret, of course, had not known. The first sign was a phone call. My father called on a Sunday evening, which was unusual because we usually texted, and his voice had that careful quality it got when he was delivering news that someone else had told him to deliver. He asked how I was doing, made small talk about the weather for about 2 minutes longer than necessary, and then said Margaret had been thinking about my financial situation and wondered if I had given any thought to long-term planning. I said I had. He said Margaret felt that given my age and inexperience, it might make sense to have the savings in a joint account structure so that there was some oversight, someone to help me make smart decisions. He said it almost like he believed it. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Dad, I appreciate that, but I'm doing fine. The money is in a savings account, and I'm not touching it. I don't need help managing it." He said he understood, that it was just a thought, that Margaret just wanted to look out for me. I said thank you, and ended the call. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall for a long time, trying to decide if what I had just heard was as strange as it felt. Priya came in from the kitchen, looked at my face, and sat down next to me. I told her what had happened. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she said, "That's not concern. That's reconnaissance." I replayed the conversation in my head several more times over the following week. The word oversight kept snagging at me. Who uses the word oversight when talking about a stepdaughter's private inheritance? I started paying closer attention. Over the next 2 months, there were 3 more variations of the same conversation. Once through my father, once in a group text that Margaret inserted herself into, and once in a direct call from Margaret herself. That last one was the most revealing. Her tone was warm and reasonable, the tone of someone who has practiced. She talked about how family finances worked best when they were transparent, how she and my father were trying to create a unified household structure, how it would actually be a relief for me not to feel solely responsible for a significant sum at such a young age. She said the word relief like she was offering me something. I asked her, as calmly as I could, whose name she was suggesting would be on this joint account. She said she and my father would be co-signatories, just to provide guidance. I told her I would think about it. Then I hung up and called Priya from the other room even though she was literally 10 feet away. I want to explain here why I didn't simply say no and be done with it, because I know that's what most people would think is obvious. Here's the truth. I was still trying to protect my relationship with my father. My mother was gone. He was the only parent I had. Margaret had already made it clear, in small, consistent ways, that my access to my father ran through her, that if I wanted Sunday calls and holiday dinners and the basic maintenance of a parent-child relationship, I needed to stay in her good graces. I wasn't ready to blow that up yet, so I stalled. I said I was thinking about it. I kept saying I was thinking about it. And while I was stalling, I was also documenting. Priya had suggested it early on, and she was right. I saved every text. I forwarded every voicemail to my email. I wrote down dates and summaries of phone calls within an hour of having them. I didn't know yet what I would do with any of it. I just knew that when someone is trying to get access to something that belongs to you, having a record matters. It was during my final year of nursing school that it escalated. I was home for Thanksgiving. I had come back partly because I missed my father, and partly because absence makes certain things easier to ignore. The 3 days went reasonably well on the surface. Margaret was pleasant. My father seemed happy. I helped cook and ate the food and watched football I didn't care about. On my last morning, I went into the home office to print a return bus ticket and found a stack of papers on the desk that I wouldn't have noticed, except that the top page had my name on it. I stopped. I looked more carefully without touching anything. It was a document from a financial management service. My name was printed clearly at the top, and below it, in smaller text, was Margaret's name listed as an authorized account manager. The document appeared partially filled out. The account number printed on the page matched a format I recognized. My heart was going very fast, but my hands were steady. I took out my phone and photographed every page before I put everything back exactly as I had found it. Then I printed my bus ticket, said goodbye to my father in the kitchen, hugged him for a second longer than usual because I didn't know what was coming, and left. On the bus, I went through the photos carefully. It was an account management authorization form from the bank that held my mother's insurance money. I had never opened an account with this particular service. I had certainly never authorized Margaret as anything. The form appeared to have been completed using my personal information, my date of birth, my address, details that my father would have had access to. By the time I got back to the apartment, I had already decided what I was going to do. I was not going to call my father. I was not going to confront Margaret. I was going to go directly to the bank and then directly to someone who understood what I was looking at. The bank was the easy part. I went in person as soon as I returned home, explained to a manager that I believed there had been an unauthorized attempt to access my account, and provided the photos as documentation. The manager confirmed that an application had been submitted but had not yet been processed because a verification step had flagged it for review. She was very calm and professional about it. She also suggested, with careful wording that made it clear she had seen this kind of thing before, that I might want to consult a legal professional. I made an appointment with a legal aid office 2 days later. The attorney I met with was a woman in her mid-40s who listened to everything without interrupting and then spent about 40 minutes explaining what I was looking at. Attempting to gain unauthorized access to someone else's financial account using fraudulently submitted documentation was not a gray area. It was fraud. The fact that my personal information had been used without my consent made it identity fraud. The fact that it was a family member did not change the legal characterization. It only made the social dynamics more complicated. which was not the law's problem. She helped me understand my options. I could file a police report, which would initiate a formal investigation. I could also, she explained, pursue a private resolution first, which would mean presenting Margaret with documentation of what she had done and what it constituted legally, and giving her an opportunity to sign an agreement that she would have no further contact with my financial accounts in any form, ever. If she refused, or if anything like this happened again, then the police report would already be ready to file. I thought about it for exactly 1 day. I chose the private resolution first, not because I was protecting Margaret, but because I was protecting my father. He was still my father, and if this went to a police report immediately, his wife would be investigated for fraud, and I needed to know whether he knew what she had done before I blew everything up. The meeting happened at my father's house 2 weeks before Christmas. I had asked my father to be there. I had not told him in advance what it was about. I arrived with a folder and a very clear plan. My father looked confused when I sat down at the kitchen table with documents. Margaret looked at the folder the way you look at something you recognize and were not expecting to see in someone else's hands. I was very calm. I laid out the photographs of the authorization form. I explained what it was. I explained that it had been submitted to my bank. I explained what submitting a form with someone else's personal information without their consent is classified as under the law. I used the specific terms the attorney had used. I watched Margaret's face while I talked. She started to speak twice and stopped herself both times. My father was completely silent. His face went through several expressions I had never seen on him before. When I finished laying out the documentation, I looked at him directly and asked if he had known about the form. He said no. He said it quietly, and he said it once, and I believed him. Because whatever my father's failings were, I had never known him to be a good liar, and the look on his face was not guilt. It was the look of a man realizing something about the person sitting next to him. I put the legal agreement on the table. I explained that it was a binding document in which Margaret acknowledged the attempted access, committed to having no further involvement with my finances in any form, and confirmed that she understood the legal consequences of any future violations. I told her she could have her own attorney review it. I told her the alternative was a police report, which was already drafted and ready to file. She said she needed time to think. I said she had 24 hours. My father looked at Margaret for a long moment. Then he looked at me. Then he picked up the document himself and slid it across the table toward her and said, "Sign it." She signed it that evening. In the days that followed, my father called me twice. The first call was halting and uncomfortable and mostly silence. The second was longer. He said he was sorry. Not a performed apology. Not the kind that is really an explanation. A small, tired sorry that came from somewhere real. He said he hadn't seen it happening. He said he should have paid more attention to what was being done in his name. He didn't ask me to forgive Margaret. He didn't try to explain her. He just said he was sorry, and that he should have been watching out for me better. I told him I heard him. I told him I needed some time. He said he understood. Christmas came a few weeks later. I sent a card to the house, addressed to both of them. Inside the card, on a plain white note card, I had written one line: "I hope this year we all choose to protect what actually matters." I tucked a second envelope inside, addressed only to Margaret. She opened it at the table, according to my father, who told me about it afterward. Inside was a single copy of the signed legal agreement, neatly folded. No note, no message, just the document. So she would have her own record of exactly where the line was, and exactly what it had cost her to find out where I had drawn it. My father told me later she didn't say anything. She just folded it back up and put it in her pocket. That was the point. I want to say something to anyone who is watching this and recognizing pieces of their own life in it. The hardest part of what I went through wasn't the fraud attempt. It wasn't the legal process or the confrontation. The hardest part was accepting that protecting yourself from someone inside your family means accepting that the relationship will never be what you needed it to be. My father and I have rebuilt something, slowly. It's smaller and more careful than what I had imagined a father-daughter relationship should be, but it's real, and it's honest, and it belongs to us. Margaret and I have not had a real conversation since. We are polite at the edges of family events. She knows where the boundary is. I know she knows. My mother's money is still in that savings account, untouched, exactly where she put it. When I look at it, I don't just see $42,000. I see my mother sitting in that hospital bed, holding my hand, telling me she wanted to make sure I always had a floor beneath me. She built that floor. I defended it. And nobody is going to take it from me. If you've been in a situation where someone you trusted tried to access what was yours, your finances, your inheritance, your sense of safety, I want you to know that documenting everything, staying calm, and knowing your rights are not overreactions. They are the tools that protect you when emotion alone is not enough. You don't have to blow up your family to protect yourself. But you also do not have to apologize for protecting what is yours. Thank you for being here and for listening to the end. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you've lived through something like this, I'd really like to hear from you in the comments below.